Number 5. Maeve. Maeve is another high skill champion, much like Maldamba. However, the difference between a good Maeve and a bad one is much more noticeable than that of Damba. Maeve has the second lowest health in the game, being 1900. Her primary fire throws 2 daggers, each dealing 400 damage. A special thing about these daggers is that there is no ammo count, and therefore Maeve never has to reload. Maeve's first ability is Pounce. On a 10-second cooldown, Maeve will dash forward, and connecting with an enemy will deal 400 damage. A special feature of Pounce is that when hitting an enemy, Maeve will bounce backwards, making it easy to follow up with a set of daggers. Next up is Maeve's Prowl. On a 12-second cooldown, Maeve moves 50% faster and increases her jump height for 5 seconds. Using any ability will cancel Prowl early. 9 lives is Maeve's last and most important ability. Housing a 20-second cooldown, 9 lives resets the cooldown of Pounce and Prowl and heals Maeve for 400 health. Lastly, Maeve's ultimate is called Midnight. Enemies within 300 feet of Maeve will have their vision significantly reduced for a duration of 4 seconds. Maeve also has a passive ability, which allows her to double jump. Now, Maeve is a bit of a tricky one to get working for Overwatch. I personally believe that Maeve's core abilities function well, but need little quality of life buffs to work better. Maeve's Overwatch health will be 150 health and 50 shield. Maeve's daggers will deal 40 damage each. The cooldown on Pounce is insanely long in my opinion, and its Overwatch cooldown would be brought down to 7 seconds, and deal 40 damage on impact. Prowl's cooldown will also be brought down, this time to 10 seconds, and function the same as Paladins. And despite the long cooldown, I think 9 lives is fine as it is. It will reset the cooldowns on Pounce and Prowl, and also restore Maeve's 50 shields for a bit of self-sustain. Now for Midnight. I feel the ultimate is pretty cool, but also one of the weaker ones in Paladins. So I gave it a tiny nudge. We're going to keep the duration at 4 seconds, but allow Maeve to deal 10% extra damage during Midnight. So essentially Maeve will receive a 10% damage boost for 4 seconds while using Midnight. The extra 10% will make her abilities deal 44 damage instead of 40. Number 4. Bald Bitch Imani. If you guys have been watching my Paladin streams, you know that Imani is one of my favorite characters to play. Specifically because her fire stance plays like a better version of Symmetra. But the concept of a stance swapping hero is something we do not yet have in Overwatch. And unlike Koga, Imani's stance swap is not a gimmick. Like most of the cast, Imani sits at 2200 health. In Imani's Frost stance, her primary fire is the Frost Bolt, which deals 650 damage per hit. Imani's main cooldown in Frost stance is the Frost Bomb, which deals 800 damage and roots enemies for 1.5 seconds. It can be detonated early, and has a 20-second cooldown. If Imani uses her next ability, Elemental Shift, on an 8-second cooldown, she will gain access to a new primary fire and a new cooldown. One of my favorite primary fires in the game is called Fireball. Imani begins charging a fireball for 1.2 seconds that deals 1000 damage on hit. Additionally, Imani can hold her fireball infinitely, unlike someone else we know. Imani's ability in Fire Stance is Inferno Cannon, dealing 110 damage every 0.09 seconds for 3 seconds. If on a single target, Imani will deal roughly 3300 damage. Using the ability will lock Imani in place, and Imani will float if she is in the air. And regardless of stance, Imani has access to her pathetic movement ability, Frostfire Glide. I say pathetic because for the 12-second cooldown, it moves quite slowly on base for 3 seconds. And lastly, Imani's ultimate is Dragon's Call. Imani will summon a dragon that deals 1700 DPS with its primary fire. The dragon is controlled by the player and has 7500 health and lasts for a whopping 20 seconds. Imani herself is left idle in this state, and if she is found and killed, the dragon will die as well. Imani also has a mana passive, where filling up the bar by dealing damage will either fire 2 Frost Bolts or a Fireball immediately. Unfortunately in Paladins, Imani does not have a talent that revolves around stance swapping, and thus, many players stick to one stance, usually Ice, for the whole game. When I make Imani for Overwatch, the first thing I will do is lower the cooldown of Elemental Shift to 6 seconds. We're also going to remove the mana passive because it doesn't really add much to Imani's kit. Imani's health will of course be the standard 200. Imani's Frostbolt will deal 60 damage on hit. Frost Bomb will maintain its lengthy 20-second cooldown and deal 70 damage on impact while rooting for 1.5 seconds. Imani's Pyre Ball will have its damage upped to 120 per hit. Inferno Cannon will have its cooldown brought down to 15 seconds. Additionally, instead of locking Imani in place, her movement speed will be reduced by 30%. Frostfire Glide will go down to a 10-second cooldown and make Imani move 40% faster for the duration of 3 seconds. Now, the big one, Dragon's Call. Honestly, this ultimate is a noob stomper in Paladins, becoming less effective against smarter enemies. For Overwatch, the dragon will have 900 HP and deal 150 DPS with its primary fire. Like in Paladins, the dragon can't be healed. If Imani is killed, she will lose access to her dragon, just like in Paladins. Imani players in Overwatch will have to master a lot of skills to get the max amount of value from her. Number 3. Ashe. Probably the most balanced and popular frontline in the game. Ashe balances her low damage with her incredible area control. Ashe has 4,500 HP. Her primary fire, the Burst Cannon, deals 400 damage on impact and has a small explosion radius. The Burst Cannon will explode automatically when reaching a certain range. Ashe's first ability, Kinetic Burst, charges her gun and allows Ashe to fire a frontal cone, dealing 450 damage and knocking enemies away. The burst has a fair cooldown of 6 seconds. Next up is Ashe's movement / extra knockback ability, Shoulder Bash, on a 15-second cooldown. Ashe lowers her weapon and charges at the enemy. Connecting with an enemy will deal 800 damage and knock them back. Much like a rain charge, the ability is very punishing if you miss. Ashe's last ability is her Siege Shield. We'll be looking at this ability through her Fortress Breaker talent. The shield has 8,000 health, lasts 6 seconds, and is pretty big and moves quite slow. Siege Shield also has a 10-second cooldown. Lastly, Ashe's ultimate is Assert Dominance. Ashe takes her War Banner and leaps in the air. Landing on or near enemies deals 600 damage and stuns them for 2 seconds. The War Banner will be planted in the ground, where it gives full damage immunity to Ashe for 8 seconds if she is standing on it. Now Ashe has some very balanced crowd control in my opinion. Both of her knockback skills require the enemy to be fairly close to her. Her only stun comes from her ultimate. Believe it or not, but Ashe's ultimate previously did not have the stun built in, and people thought it was underpowered. Anyway, let's get her in Overwatch. Ashe will have 225 health and 225 armor, making for 450 health total. To balance this extra health, Ashe will maintain a range limit on her Burst Cannon. Maybe give it an extra 25% distance. The Burst Cannon will deal 40 damage per hit and 20 damage on the explosion radius. Ashe's Kinetic Burst will deal 45 damage and maintain its 6-second cooldown. Next up, the Shoulder Bash will have its cooldown lowered to 12 seconds to match Reinhardt's charge. And most importantly, the Siege Shield will maintain its 10-second cooldown and have 2,000 health to match Reinhardt's barrier. The barrier uptime will be increased to 8 seconds. A new special function of the barrier is that pressing and holding the ability will make the shield move faster to match the walk speed of most heroes, whereas tapping the ability will fire a slow-moving shield as mentioned earlier. Lastly, Assert Dominance will deal 60 damage on hit and function identically to its Paladin's counterpart. I wanted Ashe to be a fun alternative to Reinhardt. In ladder competitive, almost all games require a shield tank, with most of the time that tank being a Reinhardt. Problem is, a lot of the community, including myself, find playing Rein to be a snooze fest. Ashe is here to fix that. Her shield functionality might sound similar to my tank symmetric concept, and that's because it is. Having a barrier that can be moved at different speeds can create some interesting setups. Ashe's crowd control is arguably the most balanced in Paladins, and unlike in Overwatch, it won't immediately lead to a kill. Number 2. Khan. Almost at the end, we have Khan. Khan was probably my favorite champion release from when I started playing Paladins regularly, almost a year ago. Khan has 4,000 health. His primary fire is the Heavy Repeater, which deals 200 damage every quarter of a second. His next ability is Bulwark, and it functions almost identically to a Reinhardt shield. Battle Shout is Khan's next ability, with a 15-second cooldown. Khan screams, becoming CC immune for 1 second and granting himself and nearby allies 1000 health. Commander's Grab is Khan's last ability on a 12-second cooldown. Khan dashes forward, and connecting with an enemy will deal 600 damage and stun them for 1 second before Khan tosses them backwards. Because of the lengthy animation, Commander's Grab can be easily punished if used incorrectly. Lastly, Khan's ultimate is Overpower. Khan can target an enemy and drag them to him. While holding his victim, Khan can move them around to have his team shoot them or can slam them away. If an enemy hits a wall, they will take 700 damage. However, most of the time, the enemy is going off a cliff. Overpower lasts for 5 seconds and grants Khan CC immunity for the duration. A lot of people in Overwatch for some reason think it's bad to have ability overlap. With the exception of the lazy Symmetra rework, I am all for ability overlap. It's okay if another character has a moving shield, but different playstyle all around. Anyway, Khan in Overwatch, let's go. Khan's health will be 200 armor and 200 shield. His heavy repeater will deal 20 damage a bullet. Bulwark will get a size increase to be a tad smaller than Orion shield, and also house 1500 HP. Khan's Battle Shout will heal himself and allies in a 10 meter range, 100 health, and be on an 11-second cooldown. Commander's Grab will maintain its 12-second cooldown and deal 60 damage on impact. Lastly, Overpower will deal 70 damage on a wall hit and function identically to its Paladin's counterpart. Number 1. Jenos. Okay, Jenos brings one thing that Overwatch does not have in any of its supports: healing that does not require line of sight. Jenos has 2200 HP. His Star Splitter is an SMG-like weapon, dealing 108 damage per hit. His healing ability is Astral Mark. With an 8-second cooldown, Jenos can target an ally through walls and heal them for 300 health up front, and then 220 heals a second for 10 seconds. The definition of a true support ability is Void Grip, with its 12-second cooldown. Jenos lifts an opponent in the air for 2.5 seconds, dealing 360 damage over the duration. By itself, the ability is useless, but comboing it with a half-decent player and it can make for an easy kill. Lastly, the movement ability is Stellar Wind. Jenos lowers his weapon and moves 65% faster, while also increasing his jump height and lowering his fall speed. And his ultimate is Through Time and Space. After channeling for 1.2 seconds, Jenos fires a 2400 damage beam through walls and shields. I think you guys can see why Jenos is my top pick. Let's make his stats for Overwatch. Jenos will have 100 health and 100 shields. Jenos' Star Splitter will deal 11 damage on hit. Astral Mark will have its cooldown lowered to 5 seconds and heal allies for 25 heals a second. The heal duration will be the same 10 seconds. With the cooldown, Jenos will be capable of healing 2 allies at once. Jenos' Void Grip will now cripple opponents at the cost of the duration being lowered to 2 seconds. Stellar Wind will have its cooldown lowered to 1 second and function the same as Paladins. And lastly, Through Time and Space will deal 250 damage, which is capable of killing most of the roster. Jenos is one of the most popular characters in Paladins, despite many saying he's weak. I think the reason for this is that he's so damn fun to play. Personal opinion here, but Jenos was the first support character in an FPS that I actually wanted to learn how to play. I think the reasons for this is that he has a decent in-hand weapon, Void Grip is amazing when paired with your team, Stellar Wind allows you to reposition easily, and his ultimate, while challenging to use, is super satisfying to get kills with. All of these factors are attributed to one thing: Jenos' healing Astral Mark. Because of the way the ability works, Jenos does not have to babysit his team like so many other healers do. And because of this, he is allowed to focus on other things like picking key targets with Void Grip or challenging other characters with his weapon. Anywho, I'm YellowNinja, and this has been my top 10 list of Paladins characters I want in Overwatch. Peace. Wait, hold up, I'm coming. Oh shit!